Canada fails to tackle veteran homelessness. I'm Marco Perri. Welcome to the Perri platform. Before we even get into the news today, I just want to give a quick shout out to the Toronto Raptors for winning their first ever NBA championship. It was such an exciting moment, monumental, and a lot of Canadians over the country were just united in a sense of passion for the game of basketball. It was truly a very beautiful thing to see. Also, a quick shout out to the fans last night who were out celebrating. For the most part, it was handled responsibly and there wasn't really too many troubles. Maybe a couple here and there, a few bad apples in the bunch, but overall, handled very responsibly. And I've seen some news networks report that it was a riot. That's simply a massive overstatement of what really happened. I believe 2 cop cars got damaged and that was pretty much it. A full-on riot? Well, that would have been quite a bit worse, so thankfully we handled it responsibly. Now, if we went to Game 7 and we lost, then maybe we'd have a riot on our hands, but that was not the case. And there's one thing I want to point out. Why did everyone think they were Spider-Man last night? People were scaling light posts, they were scaling buildings, jumping on top of cars, TTC buses, and I was honestly surprised that nobody injured themselves. That right there is truly astounding, so kudos. People are more acrobatic than I thought, I guess. So now we get to our story. Advocates were calling on the federal government to help deal with the pressing issue of veteran homelessness. The motion came to the House of Commons and it had wide support for people across all parties. One conservative rep, though, she brought things to a grinding halt because she told the House that she wanted more time to debate the issue and she would not agree to the Liberals' request to collapse the debate and call for an immediate vote. They basically gave her 1 minute to talk, and from her perspective, it simply was not enough to have a valuable discussion about the issue and hash out exactly where to fix it from. As a result, she said she wanted more time, but that itself has some negative consequences, such as bringing the notion to the bottom of the totem pole, and another thing too, is that Parliament is going on break soon for the summer, so it's unlikely that this issue will be revived for quite some time. This left people feeling rather frustrated because it acts as a pseudo death sentence for the idea. It felt like some relief was coming down the pipeline, it was within reach, but at the last minute, it tumbled down the ladder of relevance yet again. I can understand the side of things where people are freaking out and they're worried about the issue never being tackled, especially because veteran homelessness is a pressing issue right now and it's affecting our populace in the immediate short term. It's not something that deserves to be pushed down the pipeline into God knows when. It also has another side effect of leaving veterans feeling like they've been abandoned by the government. The organization that they put their lives on the line for are not taking their claims seriously. Now, that may not be the case per se, but it's definitely how it's coming off to these people. One would logically assume that swift action is needed, but from my best estimation, that's only partially true. Swift action is ideal, but only if it was arrived at via carefully thought out approaches. This does not seem like to be what happened here. The representatives have been not able to achieve the level of thinking needed to address the problem. Based on that merit, it feels like skipping the debate and moving straight to a vote, which is what the Liberal reps wanted to do, without even hashing out the ideas and giving people more than just 1 minute to talk about it, well, it seems to have a lot of potential for, first of all, drawbacks, and second, not addressing the issue at its core. This helped to shed some light on one of the major downsides of our current system, though. The rejection screwed the timeline. I'm not even sure I'm in favor for lengthy summer breaks for our elected officials. It seems like a bad idea to me. It's not like all of a sudden because the summer is here, all of our problems are going to dissipate. They take lengthy time off, and by the time they come back, there's a pileup of tasks. So to me, that itself is very inefficient, and maybe there's ways of tackling that and making the government more streamlined, but that is a topic for another day. This motion that got shunted involved assisting an estimated 3,000 to 5,000 veterans who are currently without housing. One idea they were considering was a housing voucher program, and that's very similar to what the United States has. That solution, though, is exactly why I feel like more thought was needed into the process. This idea of vouchers, it's not going to in fact be the most productive in terms of eliminating the problem. You should really think of homelessness as a byproduct of a larger pattern. Not having a home itself is obviously a big issue, but you must ask yourself what causes that theme to occur in the first place. If all you do is try to tackle it directly, you're leaving the systemic issue still largely at bay. You can argue that mental health and substance abuse are the two main causes that are driving retired veterans to this homelessness epidemic. According to Veterans Canada, about 24% of veterans released from 1998 to 2007 had a mental health condition such as PTSD, depression, or anxiety. Of those people who were diagnosed with a mental health condition, 95% also had a chronic physical condition to go with it. Newsflash, war is not easy on your body and your mind. And when you come back, there are lasting, prolonged side effects of being exposed to such radical stimulus. Many of these conditions that affect the way your brains work are associated with emotional and behavioral problems. Maybe one of the ways the problem can manifest itself is a veteran's inability to maintain employment. Maybe another way is difficulty finding motivation to live as a functioning member of society. To me, it's not obvious that handing out vouchers is going to produce the best results possible. All these government reps have done is seemingly tackled or targeted a symptom of a larger problem without trying to address the larger problem at all. I think you'll find more long-lasting solutions in trying to handle the set of mental disabilities that is leading to veterans into homelessness. That can come in many forms. You can provide better resources for veterans who come back to Canada. You can implement awareness and treatment procedures directly into their training, or even something like mandatory help sessions for retirees. You diagnose and rectify any problems you come across. There's a whole realm of ideas to explore there. I would much rather that we teach someone to be self-sustaining and equip them with the proper tools to live a meaningful life, as opposed to the current solution, which is providing a short-term stopgap. Once you go down the route of vouchers, for example, it will never stop because the faucet is still metaphorically leaking. You can picture it like putting a bucket underneath that faucet instead of fixing the defective item itself. It may not even be mental health that you want to identify as the predominant cause of homelessness. Maybe you believe the harsh job market is to blame. Either way, it's far more constructive to approach the issue with that type of framework, the big picture in mind. I'm displeased that the issue has been pushed back though, and I find that itself to be appalling. It doesn't have to be like that, but unfortunately given our current circumstances and the system, it's going to happen. One major consequence is the negative sentiment associated with recruitment that's going to continue to fester. Why join the forces if this is the destiny that awaits you? It's a terrible question to face because it puts in danger a critical component of national defense. There is no shortage, right now or in history, of groups who want to bring about an end to Western values. In the past, you've had the rise of fascism, Nazism, communism, and currently, the pressures of resentment still run deep. Not having an adequate military puts you at the mercy of those who wish to do you harm. Canada has been pivotal in a number of battles, and they've helped to turn the tide in war time and time again. You cannot do that without a functional army. You cannot do that without enough soldiers to be a part of the army. You cannot do that if your citizens do not want to join because you treat them like crap after they come out. Unless you live under the very false delusion that hostility is a thing of the past, it makes no sense to allow our regime to deteriorate before our very eyes. Do you wonder why we've experienced some of the most peaceful times in human history? One part of the answer is because nobody is foolish enough to want to combat with us. And I mean Canada and the United States and our allies, because attacking one basically attacks all of them. It would spell the end for any aggressor. The risk is far too large to accommodate the award. Think about it. If you want to have a problem with a certain country, you have to really measure out how likely it is for you to succeed if it goes to battle. The likelihood currently is practically zero because of how strong our combined military strength is. Now, how about you play with the odds a little bit? What if they had a fair shot of winning? 50%, 55, 60, 65. What if it's almost certain they win? Well, you get to those numbers by, one way, weakening our military, which is what this lack of action in terms of tackling homelessness really does. And now, what you've done is you've tipped the scales and you've made the reward almost enticing enough to give it a shot. Conflict itself has not stopped, and that's a very key lesson to understand in the realm of global context. There has just been a cap placed on the number of realistic methods you have to air those grievances. You can talk about it in court, you can send envoys, but going to war, not realistic. By not maintaining that same air of discouragement, it allows for pent-up aggression to explode outwards and lead to conflict. We're not as far removed from the possibility of warfare as people want to believe. The realities of war, that's not something that anyone wants to experience, and right now, the best way to mitigate the risk is through preventative measures, and you don't let things ever escalate to that point. One way that you administer these measures is through simple, unmentioned intimidation. That's really currently what we have. Countries do not mess with us because they know we don't even have to say anything. They know what would happen if a war was to break out. You can't even call it strong arming, really. We're not doing anything. It's just our current presence is so powerful. Now, you also have citizens also asking, why do we continue to contribute billions of dollars towards numerous international initiatives when we can barely keep our country afloat itself? We need very massive repairs to our infrastructure from within. It's the age-old lesson of putting on your air mask first before you try to help others. The moral is you can easily transition from a position of help to one of detriment if you stretch yourself far too thin. That can be very literally applied to Canada. You can continue to give all this money and help countries, but if Canada collapses from within, well, there's no more money to give to anyone, and Canada suffers, and those countries also suffer. And this isn't saying stop humanitarian aid. No, it's saying that we need to establish a middle ground. We have to understand that we have needs, and also developing countries have needs too. It's all about approaching the equation logically. The two sides have to balance. If you let one side tip too hard, you relinquish the other, and currently it feels like we're doing that to ourselves, which is very, very unwise. This entire situation has been handled foolishly, and the consequences, they have the potential to be dire. At the very least, it's an injustice to those who laid down their lives to preserve the freedom of our nation. They shouldn't really be dealing with the homelessness issue, but they are. The reasons why they're doing it, they're quite valid. I believe it's rooted in mental health and abusive behavior that develops because of the trauma of war. Simply giving them houses right now, well, it's not really handling things at the appropriate level. Take it a step below, tackle that, and the issue might not exist anymore. That you won't even have to give out houses because the people can self-sustain on their own. But they need the tools to be equipped to handle that task. Otherwise, you leave them go on their own, it might not play out too well. As I've said before, this is really the appalling side of politics that we're seeing, but with any luck, the topic will appear again in the House with a better focus on tackling the issue, and hopefully soon. If you want to think big picture about the upcoming election, this is also terrible politics for Trudeau and the Liberals. You've basically alienated an entire voting base because of this. Even if it's not their fault, it was a conservative rep who pushed to have it delayed. It's still going to outlook really badly on the federal government because they ultimately have the onus to establish a more sound framework for these veterans. So that's about it for today. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a review and follow me on Twitter at Perri Platform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.